Hi, everyone. Welcome to Banff this morning. With me today is our dear friend Walt, who is on a mobile device, so he can't do a bunch of stuff. Hi, Walt.
I'll try to blunder through.
And today we're going to be talking with Chris Fox about Magitech, right? Magitech RPG that's coming out soon. Very exciting.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. And yeah, the Magitech Chronicles role-playing game.
Awesome. And Mike Lafferty couldn't make it today, so you get the superfluous gnome, aka Lala and Alice. So hi, everyone. Well, why don't you tell us a little bit about Magitech RPG? I understand it's based off of 9 novels that are, well, the last one's in progress, about to come out.
It is.
Magitech
So we have a
Chronicles. Oh my God, so good.
We have a full series that's already done. So there are 7 novels with an ending, and that's the Magitech Chronicles. And then I've started a second series called the Magitech Legacy. So that one's still open. We'll be going for a while, probably be fairly long. I can tell you all about the series, or I can tell you about the game from sort of a gamer perspective. What do you think your audience is more interested in hearing?
I think we'd love to hear about the game, and especially like the races that would be available, the backgrounds, and the mechanics of how you implemented the game so that people can actually feel that they're immersed.
Oh, I'm so excited. Okay, I usually have to talk about the fiction, which is fine, but like I love talking about the game mechanics.
Oh, we'll talk about fiction too.
Yeah. So what prompted this setting originally was, as a game master, I don't like running modules. I really don't. I prefer to run all original content whenever possible. And sometimes at the end of an exhausting week, we have professional lives. Some of us have kids. It's really hard to cook up an adventure every week consistently. And so what I realized is if you could build a system that fit that so that you as a GM could easily create content, my job would be a lot easier. And so I came up with the concept of a catalyst and built a world around it. The name of the world is Shattered Gods. That's the fantasy version of the Magitech Chronicles. And the basic concept is the gods wiped each other out in a gods war, and their bodies are now scattered across the cosmos. And your players can come to their bodies, and they're going to have to battle various creatures that have kind of grown up around the gods to try to steal the magic. And if they can steal the magic, then not just them, but their armor and weaponry will get powered up. So if you're looking at this from a D&D perspective and you're coming in with a +1 sword, it might leave +1 flaming if you're going to a fire catalyst. So you've gotten some power, your items have gotten some power, and so it makes a very modular system where you as a GM can create anything from tech demons to dragons to fire elementals, whatever you want at a catalyst, and it'll be internally consistent with the universe. So that's kind of the core drawing point for it. And then most of the core races are exciting to players. They like things like dragons. So by far our most popular race is Dragon Hatchling. They are bipedal. They have wings and a tail. They can wear armor. They carry, spell rifles. So they're by far and away the most popular ones so far. But we have all sorts of races, from traditional elves to my version of elves called Innerins, to drifters who speak in Irish Cockney. So think about the movie Snatch, and that's what they sound like. And healing potions are not just healing potions; they're healing beer. And they're made by these drifters. So they speak in this Irish Cockney, and they make the healing beer. So if you want your healing potions, you got to deal with the drifters to get it.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, so just a diverse cast of races, and the rules that you as a GM can create your own. So if you have a race that you love from a setting, and you've never been able to bring it to life before, this system exists specifically so you can add whatever you want.
That's fantastic. I pulled up the preview for the Kickstarter because it's not quite live yet. It'll go live in a couple of days, right?
Right. The last thing that we're waiting for on the Kickstarter, Tom Edwards, the wonderful artist who's done a lot of the artwork, is making 3D models so we can print miniatures. And he's doing the first draft of those so that we have some pictures to show and can list it as a stretch goal for the RPG.
That's awesome. And the art really is beautiful. It really can evoke a lot to go with to inspire you to play. So the character sheets look very nice as well.
Yeah, they're a ton of fun. The system's fairly straightforward. If you played games like Shadowrun or White Wolf, a lot of stuff is going to look familiar. We use a fistful of dice system, so you're rolling a bunch of D6s as opposed to a single D20. Trying to think of other concepts that'll be interesting to the audience. Perks and flaws are one of our most popular new additions that you probably haven't seen in another system. The way that we approach perks and flaws is you can take up to 3 flaws, and you want to structure your flaws in such a way that they will actually screw your character over. So normally when you're in a system, you're like, what is the most fake flaw that I can take that will not actually inconvenience my character. And
well, depends on the group, I think.
True, but many of the games, many of the people that I've played with will take flaws that are flaws in name only. Some of the better role players, take more tailored flaws, and kudos to them. But what we did in this system is reward people who take flaws that will inconvenience them. If you use a flaw, like say you've got punchable face is one of our flaws. You've got a punchable face. Anytime you're in a situation where that's going to inconvenience you and you kind of play it up, your GM can choose to award you a luck. And luck is very powerful. It can allow you to re-roll things, or if somebody hits you, you can force them to re-roll. And there are other things you can do with it too. And it's the only way to get luck. So in addition to being able to take a balancing perk for the flaw, you also get access to luck. And so people have so much fun taking these flaws and making up their own and then just role-playing the heck out of it because they get rewarded for it.
That's very cool. So for people who are watching that have never played a Fistful of Dice RPG, the core engine, can you tell people a little bit about how they would utilize dice in this game?
Absolutely. So you're rolling a bunch of d6s. Let's say you've got a 3 ranged as a level of the skill, and maybe a 3 in your agility, the associated attribute. You're going to be rolling 6 total dice. If you're not very good at this skill, it's just a normal skill for you, you're going to count 5s and 6s. And each one of those is going to be a success, and you're totaling up your number of successes. If you are really good at it and you have what's called a mastery, then you're counting 4 5s and 6s. So 50% of the time you're going to get a success, and obviously you're much better at those things. And we have a chart where you're looking at it to say, okay, 1 is not very difficult and 5 is, impossible. You're trying to get that number of successes to accomplish various tasks. And in combat, you only make 1 roll. In most systems, you roll to hit, and then you roll, if you hit, you roll damage. In this, you're just rolling once. And when you roll, the more successes you get, the more damage you're doing when you hit somebody. So it streamlines combat a lot. It makes things much quicker than I've played in other systems.
Very cool.
Yeah.
I noticed...
go ahead.
No, go, Walt.
I was going to say, how does the character creation work? And is it a quick character creation, or does it take a little bit of wrangling?
It's a quick character creation. People understand it very quickly. The attributes and skills are usually done in like 5 or 10 minutes, and the character sheet enables that and makes it very quick because you've got that editable PDF. The thing that slows people down and they do a lot of reading in is the magic system, because what you're doing as a player, no matter what archetype you're picking, that's the equivalent of classes. You have archetypes, and then in an archetype, you'll pick a path. So, for example, it looks like we're looking at the rules here. For example, I could decide I want to be a true mage, and then once I pick true mage, I can be a relic hunter, I can be an eradicator. I'm going to pick a path to follow as a true mage. So that part takes time, where people are kind of browsing through classes. Do you want to be a spell sniper? Do you want to be a mage killer? I mean, there's lots of different options you can choose. And so when you hand somebody the book, there can be a little bit of the shock there, where they spend some time looking at classes. So we have narrowed down the selection, at least for the quick start guide. But the main role-playing game has a lot of different paths for the various archetypes. So really what you're doing as a GM is asking a player, okay, kind of which one of these general archetypes do you want to play? Do you want to be a mercenary where you have no magic to start with, but you're counterbalancing that with cyberware? Do you want to be a true mage? Do you want to be a warrior? You get to make those choices. And almost anything you can think of is covered. So if you want to play like a thiefy character, you could be a larcenist or a spell sniper. Both of those are off of the scoundrel archetype. So does that explain it?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Now, the only thing that I didn't hear in here is the 2 things that are going to be most important to me when I get into this game. And thing number 1, can I be a drifter? And thing number 2, do I get rewarded for trying a Cockney accent?
Yes and yes.
Yes!
So drifters, I gave them great stats intentionally because I knew more people would play them. One of their perks is cast iron stomach, so they can't ever eat poison. They don't really get drunk. So they're always drinking all the time, and they're usually brewing beers just because that's what they're into. And not all those beers heal, but you can brew almost any spell into a beer, and so they have all sorts of alcoholic spells that they'll use. Like if you want to buff your strength, they're like, oh, let me just take a shot of this vodka.
Now, here's the other question, and it just dawned on me. Our friend Aid can imitate a Cockney accent very well because he's from Great Britain. And does he get penalized because he's more adept at it?
No. It's kind of a choice for a GM. So we have something I call favorite dice. And you get to decide when to award them. If you see somebody who's trying, and either they're role playing or they're trying to affect an accent, or you're impressed because they gave you a background that session, you can choose to award them between 1 and 3 favor dice for any action. So if you're really impressed by a description or a clever idea, it's like, here's 3 extra dice to roll, as a way to reward your players for kind of, playing along.
Right on. That's cool as hell. Now, in some of the, I assume you've had a bunch of test sessions on this.
We have.
In some of the test sessions, what are some of the party makeups like?
I found that a lot of people like the sound of War Mage and Eradicator, and so we had a lot of those. Didn't see very many Paladins, despite them being one of the stronger classes. Tech Mage doesn't sound terribly impressive, but actually is one of the strongest classes. So in the very first session that we ran, they saw that this character was wearing spell armor, and they wanted the spell armor, and so they attacked him. And I was at a conference for authors, so these weren't people that had a lot of gaming experience, but they were good role players, and so they had gotten into their characters and decided, oh, we're going to steal the armor from this guy, and the guy wiped out their party. It was great.
That's fantastic.
That sounds like an awesome experience. So I was showing a little bit of the World Anvil, but I wanted to talk to you about that. If people want to get into, just start learning a little bit about the system and the game and such, is there a way that they can do that right now?
Yes, if you Google Magitech Chronicles World Anvil, the very first link is going to be the page you can go to that has the lore for the world, the complete rules system for the quick start guide. So everything we're talking about now, you can look at character sheets. You've got a map of the setting, links to the novels if you're interested in those. So it's sort of a central hub for everything, what she's showing on the screen right now, that World Anvil page. And what you'll see, and this isn't fully implemented right now, we pulled it down and we're putting it back up. World Anvil has a wonderful system of maps. So as you look at the maps, you'll be able to drop pins based on what novels you've read. So we won't have spoilers. So if you haven't read the last book in the series, I'm not going to show you where the penultimate battle took place or anything like that. So if you're into the setting, it's a great place for you to dive in and learn more.
And
now,
go Walt.
Mike's much better looking and a better dancer than I am.
I didn't say Mike.
You almost did. I heard it. So when people jump into a role-playing game that's based on a property, something like Star Wars, they can have any kind of game they want and travel the universe, wherever it takes them. But there's always that hint that there is a central conflict that kind of drives Star Wars, centered around the Empire. If it's the Old Republic, it's centered around the Sith and the Jedi. Is there a central conflict that dominates the game itself, coming over from the novels, or will we see a more open where anything is possible?
I approach this very closely because I feel like Dragonlance sort of ruined itself. The novels are amazing, but as far as the role-playing game, none of my friends wanted to play Dragonlance because all the main characters are so well-defined and the wars are so well-defined. You're like never going to eclipse what the people in the novels have done. And I found that somewhat frustrating and limiting. So we always would prefer to play something like Forgotten Realms, where it didn't feel like, there were quite so many constraints or so many well-defined, characters and that central conflict. So when we did the Magitech Chronicles, the first 7 novels sort of set the stage, and you get this, war between gods and all these big events happening, and the dust settles, and that's day 1 for the RPG. And every other novel series takes place after that. So in the current in the current set of novels, the main characters are basically a level 1 relic hunter getting started from scratch. So all the crazy stuff that happens in the first main series, it's much more toned down in this one, and will be in others, because I don't want to trample on GMs. I want game masters to be able to make whatever catalyst they want and drop them in places and not feel like they're beholden to some main war or a series of novels.
That way, if somebody is trying to fabricate the one brew, the brew to rule them all, it can happen.
Exactly. It's not already defined.
If people haven't already read any of the novels, though, is there going to be a lot of information on setting that they can find somewhere to really jump in?
Yes.
And then go, oh my gosh, I love the setting, I want to go read the novels.
Yeah, so the full version of the game has something like 120 pages of just well-written prose. And some of that is fiction, some of it's history for the game, but more and more of it's being added constantly, because that's my favorite activity in the world, is making that stuff. So there is a ton of it in the main game. You won't ever have to read any of the novels, but you can if you want. There's tons of fiction, and it's all on audio too, if that's your bag. But I want people to feel like I can play this game without being beholden to the novels and fall in love with the setting just from the artwork alone.
Well,
Right on.
the
The
artwork
artwork
is
is real
fantastic.
gorgeous.
Very colorful, very cosmic in depth.
Thank you. Yeah, that was also very intentional. We've
And
got,
I mean oh, go ahead, please.
I was going to say we have 4 different artists, and I had them kind of unify the theme to all match.
The very first book of the Magitech Chronicles, the novel line, that image of the spell armor floating in space and just having the interface on his arm, that is so evocative. But then you get further into the line, and then he's being chased by dragons, and there's all sorts of craziness going on in space. It's just a really, really, I think it speaks to a level of depth that we want in this style of game, and would only benefit people to check out not only the novel line, but try and bring some of those aspects into the game.
Yeah, I want to give them as many avenues to find and create as possible. But you're also going to have that one GM who's like, I just want to be able to have some dragons in space and wants to make their whole world from scratch. And so everything I've done in the novels is only one little tiny part of the galaxy. And the rest of the galaxy is not defined. So that at one point the dragonflights ruled. So there were 8 dragonflights, and they ruled the entire galaxy. And that was something like 100,000 years ago. And they're all gone now. So who knows what's happened in the rest of the galaxy in the meantime. And GMs can find whatever they want. They can run, if you want to have Dreadnought-style space hulks where they're raiding the space hulk and trying to find the catalyst that's the engine, and fighting, undead inside, or whatever you want to plant in there. All of that is possible. And so anything can be found in any corner of the universe at any time.
That's awesome. Would you like to talk a little bit about that fiction that you were mentioning, since this seems like a great time to give us a little bit of a peek on that setting?
Sure. The main series, it covers the gods, where it starts with a main character whose mind has been wiped. So what the Confederacy will do, it's called the Cheyenne Confederacy, it's one of the governments in the setting, is they'll take people and they'll wipe their minds. So you keep all your skills, but all of your conscious memories are gone, because these make excellent shock troops. And then what they'll do is they'll take you to a catalyst and they'll herd you in, because some people will die when exposed to the magic of a catalyst. They'll take too much and they'll burn up. And so if you survive, you now have worth, and now you're a soldier, and they can take you to combat. So the main character is waking up, has no idea who he is and what's going on. It's just being shepherded into the skull of Zal, which is the planet-sized demon god that was killed in that location. And if you go to its brain cavity, you can take void magic. And so he's being led in and fighting demons and trying to get there. And that's the beginning of book 1.
That's crazy.
Sounds really cool. I guess I should go read.
Oh my God, they're so good. Going through, because we got that really awesome preview of the Kickstarter page this morning. That what do you call it? The character sheet.
Mm-hmm.
Character sheet seems to answer a lot of questions that I had about going in and making a character, but there are also some like beautifully detailed artwork in the character sheet that actually bring up some questions. Can you talk about the 8 paths, the 8 details centered right around the tree in the center of the character sheet?
Yeah, absolutely. That's the core magic system that you're seeing there. That's the Circle of 8, and this is all detailed in the websites. If you want to read this, I even have a video about it as well. We have a YouTube channel that has rules and videos. But the short version of the Circle of 8 is each one of these aspects can be used independently. And as a player character, everybody gets to pick one. Unless you're a mercenary, that's the only exception. And they get, cyberware to compensate for it. But almost everybody's going to start out with a type of magic. If you're a true mage, you're going to get 2 types of magic, and they're going to be adjacent. And the reason for that is adjacent aspects unlock greater paths. So on the top there, you'll see life. And then right next to that is air. If you combine those 2, that's artificing. That's how magic items are made. And all the rules are defined. So you're creating living magic items, but the only people who can do that have to have both life and air. And so you either have to be born with those, like your ancestors maybe went to a life catalyst, or you yourself have found one and managed to acquire life magic in some way.
That's pretty badass. That sheet is so gorgeous looking.
It is
Thank
really
you.
pretty. And
And
don't worry, we'll put all the appropriate links down in the description in case you're not following fast enough.
right on. Now the on the back you have that that image of the spell armor.
Mm-hmm.
Does that work for a hit location chart?
Not really. We decided not to do hit locations because it added too much complexity, and the whole goal of the system is to support narrative gameplay. So
Awesome.
we want it as simple as possible. What it does do, though, is show you all your potion loaders. So Spell Armor has what's called a potion loader, and you hear about this in the novel all the time. And you can put any type of potion you want in there. So it can be healing beer, a counterspell potion, a flaming strength potion. I mean, whatever you want to put in there. And there's various ones that you can purchase as equipment. And so you just load them on the sheet and you show where they are. And then if you're going to burn a healing potion, you just cross it off in the potion loader.
That is wild. Yeah, I'm so stoked for this. This is going to be badass. Now, what are some of the certain games have a tendency to lend to certain game styles. In my own game, Supers, we have a way that anything on your sheet can be used offensively or defensively during combat or specialized actions. So people have a tendency to try and game the system, which was how it was made, to see what they can come up with. If you had to define the system for Magitech Chronicles RPG to say, my players really love to do this, what would be one of the actions that you can kind of say, this happens all the time and it's awesome?
Combat, absolutely, without a doubt. And it doesn't matter what you do. You can use a gigantic two-handed spell blade, and you can channel disintegrates through it as you're chopping people in half.
Oh my God, that sounds awesome.
You can hang back as a spell sniper, and let's say as a spell sniper, you picked a life magic. So you can fire the equivalent of laser bolts. They're called life bolts. But you also can fire healing spells. So maybe you're hiding on a roof and your party's under attack and you're healing and they can't find you. So they can't pick the healer off because you're hiding.
So that's great.
I would say the two things people love the most are customization and then employing it in combat. Now, the way that our system works is if you're really good at something, you are going to hit almost 100% of the time, unless you're firing at like a god or somebody with incredible defenses. There's going to be a way for you to land a hit. And so when people are in combat, you actually get to do heroic, cool things. It's not like in Dungeons and Dragons where it's like, okay, I've got athletics and I'm pretty good at it, but I'm trying to climb this tree and I roll a 1, I fall. That'll never, ever happen in this system.
Oh, you should drive me nuts. We'd be playing something and somebody would roll that 1 and they'd be like, yes, your sword broke. Well, didn't you say it was indestructible? Oh, you hit yourself. Thought I was trained with this.
My favorite is Palladium, the old school Palladium. I don't know if you guys played that.
Oh my goodness.
There's 3 riffs.
Oh.
But they had a skill called poison use. And if you failed the skill check, you died. So you've got like a 13% chance to succeed and an 87% chance to fail.
That's insane.
That is something about the dice systems that aren't D20 based that a lot of people like, is that the bell curve isn't skyrocket up and drop, but more, more balanced and a smaller bandwidth on it. So
the downside that usually introduces, though, is that people don't ever want to learn anything except for D20. So like right now it's 5th edition. Everybody wants to play 5th edition. There's already people in my Facebook group that are making a homebrew port to 5e so they can play it that way, which I'm fine with. But getting people to try a new setting is hard. If you give them a system that they can see that's super easy to understand, like I just pick up this number of dice and throw them and, they're color coded, so I know how to count them. We're finding that we're able to get people in very, very quickly. And that was a major challenge for a lot of early iterations of the game. We had to make a lot of changes and jettison a lot of complex rules because while they make sense, it's not beneficial to most players.
Now, with incorporated settings like this, where you have the setting and the rules built into the same book, one of the benefits for people that like you were just saying, might be porting over to another game system is having that fully realized world with all that art that you can show your players right there at your fingertips. What are some of the highlights that people are going to see when they open up the Magitech Chronicles RPG, as far as like worlds, governments? What are some of the things that the flavors that might draw people in?
If people play video games, you're going to recognize some stuff right off the bat. So the the new Texas military and the Turnus government is very reminiscent of ancient Texas. Terra exists in the setting. Everybody knows that. Nobody knows where it is or how old it is. But there's colonies that have come from it. And so anybody who wants to play like a mage killer or any sort of technology-based character typically comes from Turnus. And so you see a lot of people with, Southern drawls when they're playing their characters. A lot of Marines. Awesome. Yeah, it's great. It really is funny because it's easy for people to get in because almost everybody knows what a Southern drawl sounds like. And so even people who don't do a lot of role play, they're able to jump in. Cheyennes are very popular. They are kind of like elves. They're immortal and they are superhumanly beautiful, but they don't have curved ears or anything. And they have to continue to ingest magic to survive and to prevent them from aging. So Cheyennes are very popular because anybody who wants an immortal race, that's an easy way to get it. But by far and away, the most popular one is Dragon Hatchling, because there's a hatchling for every type of aspect. So you can have a Cinder Drake hatchling, you can have a Void hatchling, you can have a Life hatchling, and they all have breath weapons that are coded to whatever that aspect is. So if you want really thick armor and you want to be tough and you want to play something non-human, those dragons are a ton of fun and they have their own factions. That's some of the top ones.
That's pretty cool. And if we run an online version of this to kind of showcase things, I need Aid Smith to do a Southern drawl. It would be amazing.
Well, we'll have to see if we can pull Aid into this. We already know that we're going to try and get an actual play and some demo sessions up ASAP, but I don't know if we'll line up on schedule with Aid, but I definitely want to drag him into it.
So the basic scenario will be you guys are, you've never seen magic. You have no idea how magic works. You're coming from a planet that's been isolated. It's a colony that was cut off a long time ago. And you've now gotten your technology to a point where you can leave the world and start exploring. And you guys are on the ship that's doing that.
Cool.
That's pretty cool.
So it's designed for people who know nothing about the setting. And then as the GM, you can sort of introduce all the elements one by one. You're like, oh my God, we're being attacked by a dragon in our starship.
That's crazy. Now, as the Kickstarter progresses, obviously we have the book. Inside the book, we have the RPG rules and the setting. What are we looking like for adventures? I mean, you had said you usually don't run pre-generated stuff, but for those of us that where time is a factor, and just grabbing that book on the go really makes gaming a little easier. Will we have some pre-generated adventures?
We will. We call them sagas. And the way that they work is they're hero's journey style stories, but they're interleaved with the novel. So if you don't like the novels or don't want anything to do with the novels, you'll never know they're connected. But if you've read the novels, you're going to find all sorts of Easter eggs, and all the characters, all the magic items from the novels are statted out in these sagas. And the adventures are designed to run in parallel. So as an example, in Dying World, the main character is trying to get people off the planet. Some of the people that are getting off the planet are at an academy that he attended, and the player characters are students at this academy. So the saga would be them at the academy trying to get off this planet, and their narrative kind of touches the novels. So if you're reading the novels, great, you've got that interplay. If not, you don't have to worry about it. But they're designed, again, to be hero's journey style novels, somewhat similar to Pathfinder adventure paths.
Gotcha.
You were mentioning that you designed this for the GM that is on the go, that is able to pick up and just start GMing because you deal with a lot of people that don't want to have to go through a lot of hoops. So how did you streamline mechanics of combat and enemies so that the GM doesn't have to spend 2 hours or 10 hours making up the stack of character sheets for the enemies beforehand?
So I have a limited stat block concept. So there's only like 5 or 6 stats you need to define. And the most important 3 are going to be your defenses. And this is why the system works as well as it does. We have 3 defenses. Brace is for melee attacks, dodge is for ranged attacks, and skepticism is for magic attacks. And so typically if you can't hit somebody on one defense, you're going to shift over and try and hit them on another. And so those 3 kind of rock, paper, scissor defenses mean combat flows very quickly. You're having to make choices about, okay, that guy is really tough in melee, so I shouldn't run up and hit him with my sword. Maybe I'll fall back and hit him with a spell rifle. And combat flows quickly and accordingly, and things that you would do logically in character are sort of supported by the system. So in that way, it's much simpler. You don't have to define very much. If you have hit points, a couple of basic abilities, and the basic defenses for a creature, which we provide a stat block for almost everything, You can plug those in really easily. And when you're walking through the Catalyst creation rules, it's actually asking you to create 3 or 4 creatures. So it'll say, okay, you need a bottom tier goblin-like creature, and then maybe you need something that's more middle tier, that's like an elemental of some kind. Maybe it's an earth elemental or, life elemental. And then you need something top tier that's maybe the guardian of the catalyst that these people are going to have to fight. So maybe there's an elder ice worm that is the taking up residence at this catalyst and is slowly draining the magic. And you as the GM are going through sort of this checklist, and you're adding in, whatever you want to do. You're choosing your aspect. You're sort of choosing who the god was and how they died. And you come out of it with, I've got 4 or 5 encounters that are basically easy to run.
That's pretty cool.
Very cool.
Yeah. What kind of feedback have you got on that aspect of the system from people trying it out on their own?
Not enough yet, unfortunately. So we have a Facebook group where GMs are just starting to test this stuff out, but I actually haven't gotten feedback. I've run it myself and I've used it a lot, but I'm still the only person who's tested that particular rule set.
Well, we'll have to drop that Facebook group link in the description as well for people and for me, because I need to go check that out.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well,
go ahead, please.
No, please go, Walt.
I was going to say, so far, just looking at the Kickstarter, you have a lot of the art. You were talking about that Mr. Edwards is making more. Is it going to be an art-intensive book, or are you going to intersperse a little bit so that the text takes more of a front seat?
I really like art-heavy books, and there's art on pretty much every page spread. So if you're looking at 2 pages, you're going to see a piece of artwork. If it's 350 pages, I want 175 pieces of artwork. But the way to do that, we found, is I have these massive pieces that are made, and you can crop 4 different images out of the same piece of artwork. And so that's kind of how we're getting around it. And I have a lot of it. Every cover for every novel I've done has a piece of artwork. And then I had, other stuff that I've commissioned. So it's been all out of pocket so far. And I have, I don't know, maybe 50 or 60 good pieces, but I'd like to get up to 100 more.
Oh yeah. Now, have you just looking at how the artwork kind of draws people in? This is probably going to do more than just the list of 100 spells that somebody put up on Kickstarter for $5. Do you have stretch goals planned for this for going forward?
The only reason it's not live yet is I need to finalize that. So what I was waiting for was Tom to finish the first set of miniature models. So he did a 3D model of Jarek's spell armor and a 3D model of a dragon, and we're going to have some starships as well, hopefully. And I want to offer those as a stretch goal. So if we hit let's say, I don't know, $15,000, which seems crazy, then maybe we'll be able to produce a line of miniature files that we can give out to the backers. So everybody who backs would get a copy of these files and be able to go to Hero Forge and make your own minis.
So they're just straight STL files that you can upload and print yourself.
Exactly. That's the goal.
Oh, that's cool. Now, is there a tactical element to this, or is it more theater of the mind?
It's tactical, extremely tactical. I love tactical gaming, but I also love narrative gameplay. So we needed something that was both. So we have space combat rules that work really, really well. And they just have some simple acceleration rules. They can work on a hex map or a square map. Whatever your group uses will work with the system. So you as the GM get to make that translation.
That's cool.
Yeah, and the way range works is very straightforward. So let's say you've got a melee weapon. It just has a range of 1. Or if you've got a 2-handed sword, it's got a range of 2. So you don't need a mechanic like reach, for example. It's very simplified in every way we can make it. So that, my best friend's 75-year-old mother, who does play with us very regularly and has for decades, has no problem with the mechanics.
Oh, that's awesome.
Rules.
Well, this brings up an interesting question for me. A lot of games these days are doing zones. So you're saying a reach of 1 or a reach of 2. Are you doing zones, or is it quantified by squares?
By squares.
Okay.
We found that was simpler for people to track. So if you say I've got a 3 range and that translates into 3 squares or 3 hexes, it's much easier for players.
I figured that, since you said we get to use a hex map or a square map, but for viewers who might have that question, I figured just clarification.
And we cheated for space. So what I did is I came up with clicks. Well, what is a click? Well, I don't know. That's up to you. As a GM, a click is a square, or a click is a hex. And so the theater of combat is exactly as you need it, big as you need it to be when you're playing it out.
Cool.
That's pretty cool. Oh, yeah.
A close-up galactic battle or a long-distance shooting battle.
Yeah, either way, the rules will support it.
Now, you were saying that you have a system of space combat.
Mm-hmm.
is this kind of like naval combat where everybody lines up along the same axis and just shoots at each other? Or is it in full 3 dimensions where, you know, battleships can line up almost like vertically on top of each other, underneath each other, where, you know, direction isn't an issue because you're in space?
Right. So direction isn't an issue because you're in space. So what we do to do the 3rd dimension, the simplest thing that you tell GMs is you just have a D20. This is the only way you'll use a D20 in the setting. And that marks the elevation of a ship. And you can do a positive or a negative elevation, so up to 20 if you're using a D20, to show where that thing is in relation to the other ships. You also can use scenery to somewhat, you know, simulate that. But in general, we found that the D20 is the best way to represent a 3D battlefield.
That's pretty cool. I'm sorry, Lala. I'm hogging all the questions.
No, no problem.
I'm so
I hogged earlier.
And I apologize if I seem scattershot. Broadcasting from the car, there's a lot of creepy stuff going on here. I kind of wish I had some spell armor. So when you're playing like space combat, right? You know, you have these long ranges. You have obviously battlefield in 3 dimensions, and then you board the other ship. Is it one universal system that governs all these different microsystems, or is the game split up into microsystems where space combat is a little different than like combat on your feet?
Space combat only has one mechanical difference, and that's acceleration. And sometimes this takes place in regular combat as well if you've got vehicles. So you have 3 different, typically, speed increments, 1, 2, and 3. And so let's say your base speed is 12. I'm in my first increment, I'm going 12. I expend an action and I accelerate. Now I'm going 24. I accelerate again. Now I'm going 36. It's not up to 36. I'm going a full 36 no matter what until I choose to decelerate. And you can move off the battlefield. So you can label something as off the battlefield in a different direction. So you're still aware that that thing is there, but it's no longer in the theater of operations. It's just gone too far away. And so those 2 things work together. But beyond that, everything else is fairly normal combat. When you board a ship, you'll typically set up a new, game board, like you'll wipe the map clean and you'll set up a new, okay, now we're going inside the ship. And typically how that goes is if you're using magic, you might use a teleportation pad, which if pressed up against the outside of a ship, you just teleport inside. If it's technology, you're going to use more standard expanse style boarding tubes.
Are you providing people with the insides of spaceships? This is a very important question because I can never find good insides of spaceships.
Eventually, yes. So I've only gotten hand-drawn ones that I've worked on so far, but I will be releasing a book that has all the ships. And it's designed to release the ships as levels. So you can see, okay, this is level 4, and this is what's here, and this is how you show it to your players, and here's a hex map. And I'd like to have that for as many ships as possible, especially since the larger ships are adventures, where it's like we come to this dreadnought, it's been abandoned for 10,000 years, there's a catalyst that's gone wild, that served as the engine at one point, and now there's a bunch of insane spiders that prowl the corridors, and we have to get past them. So that becomes its own adventure, and so those things are going to need maps.
Awesome, that sounds really cool. I can't wait because those maps like that are useful even if you don't end up playing the system. Mm-hmm. A lot of people end up picking up supplements like that. Mm-hmm. There aren't that many, like I said.
And those will be in a separate supplement, so people who are interested in ships don't necessarily even need to play the Magitek Chronicles.
Very cool. Anything else you want to add, Walt? Chris?
I can't wait for a live play. I can't wait to show off how the system works because it is so much fun to play.
We're really excited to do a live play with you very soon, so yay. Walt seems to have frozen, so it sounds like he is... Well, I'm looking forward to a live play as well. And it sounds like this is a good time to close up. So thank you so much for joining us, Chris. I learned a lot about Magitech RPG, Magitech Chronicles RPG, and I'm really looking forward to getting my hands on it. So.
Well, thanks for having me. You guys are great, and I am a fan of the show. I'll keep watching.
Awesome. Thank you.